Welcome, everybody, back to another episode of Risky Thoughts. Tonight with Rob and Zhang. Roy is unfortunately out of town this week, and he is working very hard out in British Columbia, trying to start up his new adventure that he spoke about in a few episodes. And tonight I've had the pleasure of Zhang joining. So we are going to go through tonight's episode with the absence of Roy for the first time, and we'll see how that goes.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks for listening, thinkers.
So, I know we talked briefly now, Zhang, before we kind of went online here, that we were going to explore a topic that is close to you right now, given the new opportunity that's presented itself for you.
Yeah, I got a job offer. I mean, the ink is not dry on the contract yet, but got the phone call and they said they'd like to have me on board. So, I mean, the stress of finding a job is gone, but now the new stress and new anxiety of, am I going to be good enough for this new job, or, or are my skills good enough? And yeah, the uncertainty of success, I guess, is what I'm worried about.
So what I wanted to comment on, and the reason why I paused, is because I wanted it to be fresh in my mind before I got a chance to respond to you. One thing I think that's a common thread between you, me, and Roy is that we have this very strange inability to find inner confidence when we move into a new space or a new adventure or whatever. Like, Roy's out there now, and he's taken on a challenge that he's never done before, and he's obviously doing something that makes him uncomfortable. And I think he has gone into this with the mindset that I've gone into my previous jobs, and it sounds like you are going into your next job with this mindset, which is that we feel like we don't really know what the hell we're doing.
Yeah. Now, do you think it's just a matter of like fake it till you make it, or?
I don't know if it's that simple, because through time, I've been through lots of jobs now. I've been through lots of interviews. I've gotten new positions at new places. And what I have found is that despite my thoughts about not thinking that I know what I'm doing, I guess my success would say otherwise. And I'm not quite still there, like I'm not fully there yet to be like, oh, I am great at what I do. I still have like a part of me that thinks like, you're not great for this, and like you're gonna have to like fake it for now. But I don't think that it's actually faking it. I think we go in thinking that we're gonna fake it, and like the act of faking it, for those of you who can't see, I'm putting air quotes, faking it, is actually
what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, is actually the job. Like, I'm doing my job, right?
Yeah. So, I think so. I've always, like, the jobs that I've had have always kind of been, I would say, entering at like a entry level stage and then working your way up, and that feels a lot more comfortable, right? It's like the expectation isn't there, but I'm kind of going in as a more like, senior role. Like, I guess people expect me to be some type of like expert. But deep down, you're just like, I don't know, like...
Yeah, the doubt is there.
The doubt is there.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I went from being entry level in my industry was project coordinator, I would say, for like an office space. That's the entry level position. I did that for 7 years. I'm going to guess about 7 years, maybe 10. I don't even know now. At some point in that process, I would say that I transitioned into a project manager role, or junior project manager's role, without the title. And so I was picking up the skills that came along with being a PM just by the nature of how my boss handled passing work to me and delegating work to me. It was more responsibility as time went on. Mm-hmm. And that edged me into the space. So when I moved into the next role as an actual project manager, I felt, inadequate going into the role because I never had the PM title before. So there's like that overwhelming thought process that's like, well, now I am a PM, and now there's expectations, like you said, that I have to uphold. And it was definitely terrifying, a little unsettling, and but as time goes on, and if you last past a few months in a company, it's usually a pretty good indicator that they think you're doing well enough to earn that position. Right? Because there's usually a probationary period when you start a job. It's usually 3 months, 6 months sometimes, whatever. So if you get past probation, like, they must like you. You must be doing something right. And I think once you get to that point is when I start to develop confidence. But more than that, I learn the people I'm working with, and I become familiar with the personalities around me. And then I can kind of really start to gauge my success, because you can tell when someone doesn't like what you're doing,
Yeah.
or that they don't like you. And if they start to appreciate you, you can kind of feel that, right? There's like a social element of it.
So I think a great advice that my old boss gave me was, you got, especially when you're working, you have a direct manager, you got two goals or two objectives. One of them is make your boss's life easier, and one of them is make him look good.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, that's the truth. That is the truth.
Any advice on how to get through like probationary period? Because like Roy's still on probation, right?
Technically, I think he is, and he would be for the next little while. But Roy's situation is a great example of earning his place and like slowly feeling more comfortable with his surroundings. I mean, you got to remember what he's doing is well beyond our experiences of starting a new role. Because this guy, he started a new role, and then he's left the province, and he's living with the people he's working with.
Yeah, like that's
right?
that's an easy experience, some big changes.
Yeah, it's like that. This is the definition of jumping into the deep end with no wings or water wings or whatever you want to call it. Like, this is what it is. And every day I spoke to him, I remember talking to him at the very beginning, his first couple days there. I think I even may have reached out to you.
Yeah.
He was not doing great, and he was feeling very like uncomfortable, and thought like this isn't for him, and he wanted to get out of there and move on. And then I said, just give it time, like just work on yourself, work on feeling comfortable. Don't worry about like the job. The job will come easy, right? Mm-hmm. Like the job will come to you. That part is not the part you need to worry about. It's worrying about dealing with the struggle of the adjustment.
Yeah.
Because we have a tendency, our personalities, where it's like we can do one of two things: work through it and push through it, or run. And like, we're the runners. We don't like, we're not like, let's face it, right? We're not. We choose the path of least resistance, let's put it that way. And in the situation where you're faced with that uncomfortableness, it's easier to just leave than it is to force yourself to make yourself comfortable. But he's stuck there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's in British Columbia. What's he going to do? Take a flight home just because he doesn't want to be there? Like, there's a lot more resistance for him to run.
Yeah.
So it was, I think it's the best thing that's ever happened to him. I think he's going to come back stronger. He's already told me, like, he's made some statements to his employers, and he wants some adjustments made because he's finding his space. He's finding, his role in the company. Mm-hmm. And fucking good for him, man. Like, I'm glad that he just stood up one day and said, no, this is what I'm going to do for the company. I'm going to produce, but this is how I'm going to produce for the company. The way you guys are sort of putting me into this box isn't really working. Mm-hmm. I want to be here, and this is how I'm going to be here. I'm going to help you guys in this regard, and let's make it happen. And sure enough, they accepted that. They respected his position. They respected his like confidence in his position. Mm-hmm. And I think that came because he just got comfortable. Just took time to get comfortable. And I think when you go into your new role, you can't go in expecting that on day one you're going to feel like you belong and that everything is kosher, mm-hmm. and that you're a master all of a sudden. You're going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And
it's going to take sometimes weeks, even months for some people to really just grow accustomed to their surroundings and just become familiar with their role and how, because companies are all different. Even if you're in the same position in a different company, it doesn't mean that you're going to be doing things exactly like you were doing them before.
Yeah.
Right? So I think it's time. That time is the solution to the problem, and persistence.
Yeah. I haven't been, I guess like it's been a long time since I've had like a first day of work, mm-hmm. first day of school or whatever. So curious to what that's going to be like. Like, am I going to struggle the first couple of weeks? Am I going to feel awful like every single day? Like, I don't know.
I don't know if I would say awful, but you're definitely going to feel uncomfortable. I would say that much. Yeah, I think so, man. Like, I don't think there's a single job that I ever started where on day one I felt comfortable. Like, never. My most recent job, like the one I'm currently at, it helped for me that my employers are relatively young. They are also from the same demographic as myself. We speak in a very similar language. They all went to U of T for civil engineering.
Okay.
They articulate their thoughts in a way that I understand very clearly, and we're almost always on the same page. Mm-hmm. So that was the easiest transition of all of them. But it still wasn't fully, like, it was uncomfortable. Like, the first day I got there, remember, he was like, okay, we're going to get you on this project, and I need you to get familiar with it. So here's, like, a digital folder of, like, 600 emails. Read them all, and, like, come back to me once you've, like, read them all and you understand the project. And I thought to myself, like, I do with every other job. Like, I can't do this. Like, I can't. Like, this is overwhelming. Like, how am I gonna fucking do this? But I learned, the one thing I did learn through my experience of moving to different jobs is I learned that, like, okay, Rob, you know this feeling. You know this is gonna be difficult and uncomfortable. You're supposed to feel like this right now. Just sit down and, like, the task that you're given is really not even that challenging. Just read some emails.
Yeah.
So I just sat there. I opened one email after another. I read through every single one of them. You know, I started making some little notes because I thought that might be useful. And sure enough, after about a week's time, I kind of felt like I was getting into the groove. I started understanding the project. I started realizing that this is just like every other project you've ever worked on.
So how long did it take you to read through the 600 emails?
It took me the week.
Oh, okay.
Maybe even less than that. Maybe it took me about 3 days to read through them all.
Okay.
You're not reading them in like hyper detail, right? You're talking about like skimming through to get the notes that are relevant.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that I realized from this industry is that you're never going to get full picture through reading a book, or you're going to have to experience the interactions and talking to the trade contractors, talking to your client, whatever, right? That's going to give you a better understanding. And then as long as I kept mental notes of like the general feel of what was going on, I can always say to myself, oh, I remember reading an email about this topic.
Yeah.
Let me go back and read it. Now, my employer now is like, they're so vigilant on organization that like, you can come from the outside, know nothing about the industry, know nothing about the project, know nothing about the company, and you will find a piece of information if someone asks you to go and find it. If I said to you here, Zhang, here's the folder, like the USB stick with all the files on it, I want you to go and find me an email that talks about, you know, X.
Yeah.
You would be like, you're crazy? Like, how am I supposed to know? You would open that thing, and you'd be like, oh, it's so intuitive. This folder's titled that, that's titled that, that's titled that. Like, it's all nested. It's wonderful. But so that made it easier too. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think for me, the biggest adaptation, like the biggest change that I undergo when I start a new company is A, learning their protocol, like learning their methods, and then B, learning the people. Like the people, I think, is the biggest one. Okay. That's my...
I mean, I think these are great notes. Protocol and people.
Yeah.
2 P's.
Yeah, 2 P's,
I remember
exactly.
That. Something you mentioned I thought was interesting, the idea of like understanding. When I went, so similar story to Roy, like when I actually, you know, I got kicked out of university, my marks were too low, and I went out to Vancouver to work for an engineering firm. Lied to my parents, said, oh yeah, I'm doing my professional engineering here. And that came out to bite me in the ass like later. It was like, hey, looking at my transcripts, like, didn't you already take these courses? Like, I got something to tell you, Mom and Dad. I failed out. But anyway, so.
He came back and he finished it, so.
Well, when I went there, I guess it was kind of like an internship, like a, you know, professional year, but really it was like a co-op or something like that. I was asked if I understood something. You know, I get that like, you understand this? And you know, you don't want to look like an idiot, so you're just like, yeah, I understand it. But if you have like 50% or 60% understanding, like that's actually like not enough, because you will get caught.
Yeah, you'll look like a fool.
You will be exposed.
Yes.
And that's what happened. Like I got exposed. Like my lack of understanding became exposed. And so it was interesting because that was an important life lesson I had there where, because then the next time you asked me, like, do you understand this? Like I had to make sure, like, yeah, like it's such a weird concept. Like, do you understand something? And I think a lot of people think that they understand something, but there's like levels to that. And so I kind of took that learning and I came back, you know, when I did my, you know, try to complete my degree when I came back. And so it was like going into exams, there would be a certain level of understanding that I needed to be comfortable enough to be like, okay, I can like...
I'll pass.
Yeah, I'll pass.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing was like, that level of understanding, like that wasn't a pass. That was like a B. That was like a 75, maybe like low 80s. And so sometimes I think like, man, like those people who are like getting like 95s or like, you know, the top 5%, the top like 2% of the class, like what is their level of understanding? Like they got to know this stuff like inside out.
You know, that is an interesting thing to explore because like, so the guys I work for now, their father is still around. Like he's still one of the owners of the company, or actually I'm not sure on paper. It's not really relevant, but he's around and he's got a heavy influence. He's got all the wisdom in the world. Like the guy knows everything, right? Like he's a walking textbook when it comes to execution of construction. And he's also a civil engineer who also went to U of T. Like the whole family is, and the one thing that's super interesting about the guy is that like, if he asks you a question, he already knows the answer. Like most of the time, he's already got the answer plugged in his head, and he's either just testing you, or he'll just be like, okay, well, let's see where you're at. It's like an aptitude test, right? Like, let me just weigh this guy out.
Pop quiz hot shot.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like the movie Speed. And some people will try. I tried to lie once. I didn't lie. Like, I tried to do what I normally do.
You just wing it.
Yeah, you take that little understanding that you have, and then you pile on, like, a bunch of bullshit to make it sound like a more elaborate understanding. And he stopped me, and he's just like, don't lie to me. Like, don't do that again. Like, I know that you don't know, so just say you don't know.
Yeah.
And I was warned about this from other people who know this guy before I started there. And they're like, don't bullshit the guy, because he will catch you. And it's not going to look good. And he'll test you. And they all warned me this was going to happen. And I still went in, like, thinking guns blazing, cocky individual that I am. Like, I got this. I can sugarcoat anything. No, I didn't get past, like, fucking 30 seconds with the guy. And he called me out. And I was like, wow. So then as he was explaining the same thing he had asked me about back to me, it was like, okay, so what I thought I understood about this topic, and I wasn't fully bullshitting, because I did understand. In my mind, I understood, like you said. But my understanding was like a fraction.
Surface level.
Yeah, and then he explained it to me at the level that he was expecting, and at the level, maybe not expecting, but at the level that he wants me to be at. Because his sons went through this mentorship, and his sons understand things to this level. And now that I've been there for over a year, it's really funny, because like I will do this to the next person I get the opportunity to do it to, because it was so good of an experience to be like, this was eye-opening, right? Like, and you're right, like the question, do you understand? Maybe the question needs to be asked a little differently, because people won't understand what you're asking them when you say, do you understand? Right? They're going to be like, oh, do you understand the fundamentals?
I guess the question is like, what's your level of understanding?
That's the better way to frame the question. Yeah. That's exactly correct. Yeah. Right? And like, then you can say, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you stand? Right? And then if you're being honest about it, and you'd be like, yeah, I think I'm at a 7, and in reality you're at like a 4, but that's okay, because you know what? You were really trying to venture a feel of what you thought you knew.
Yeah.
And I think it's just more, it's a far better approach, because then it's like, the consequence of not knowing and not understanding, or thinking that you understand and then realizing you really don't understand. Yeah. It's demeaning to your mental capacity. Like, all of a sudden you start questioning yourself on everything. Yeah. Because then another like a couple of days later, he came to me, he said the same thing, like, do you understand this? But he didn't say the words, do you understand? He asked me a question about something. Mm-hmm. But this time I knew that, like, I can't, the same way that you had learned, right? I can't answer it by being like, oh, yeah, this and that, I had to be like, this is what I know, right? Rather than saying, yes, I understand, or yes, this is how it works. It was like, let me tell you what I do know, and then I'll let you sort of educate me if there's anything that I'm missing, right? It was a different approach. Far more like, the word's not practical, but it was a more efficient way of doing things, because then we were able to, like, that's how we communicate in that office. Like, if you walk into that office and you hear the way the conversations are had, it's so, like, bizarre, because it's not like everyday talk. It's like, we're always speaking in the most efficient way possible to deliver messages, and then, like, the next person's able to, like, respond back with, like, again, with the most efficient response. It's really amazing to watch these guys do work, and I'm happy to be a part of it, right? But I know we're going on a little tangent here. I'm sorry about this. But anyway, bottom line is, yes, understanding is something that I think you, me, and Roy all have a tendency of... I don't even think that we go in thinking that we understand. I think that's the problem. I think that we think about ourselves in a way that's like, we believe we're con men of some sort. Like, oh, we got ourselves here just by fucking luck, and we cheated the system to be in these roles. Maybe not you, I don't know. I know that I feel like that sometimes, and I know that Roy feels like that sometimes.
No, I definitely feel like, especially now going to a new role, like, I think this is why this conversation is, like, really good, because, like, am I going to try and bullshit my way through the first couple of weeks and, like, talk like I know stuff? Or should I just be honest and be like, you know what? I don't really... So, I mean, that's the constant battle, right? Like, you think, like, oh, if I look stupid during my probationary period, like, the chance of me getting fired is, like, higher. But at the same time, like, if you're just honest about, like, your understanding, then you build a much better foundation. Because that, like, again, like, at some point you'll get exposed, right?
100%. And you're right about this, because every employer that I've ever worked for that had the compassion to at least educate me in some capacity, they've all said the same thing. If you don't know, please just ask. I don't care if you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hire you thinking that you know everything. I hired you because I know you have the potential to become great. And I actually hired you because you're young and you're moldable, and I can change the way that you think to suit the way I want you to run my business. So a lot of the time, these people are actually not looking for you to be like set in your ways and know everything, because then there's no opportunity to get you to conform to their expectations, right? So I think it's actually beneficial when you go in open-minded and with the opportunities by saying, like, you know, listen, I do know a little bit about this, and this is what I know. How can I cater this knowledge or improve this knowledge to benefit the company that I'm working for, right? Like, how can I make it better for you if you're talking to your boss, right?
Yeah.
And, like, that is a far more productive way of talking to your employer, because, you know, I think people in general also want to feel like they can educate others. People feel good. Like, if you teach somebody something and they learn something, you know, you feel good too. You feel good that you've now taught that person.
Yeah, I guess my fear is just because maybe there's two scenarios too. Like, if there's someone that's teaching you something that's so rudimentary, so basic, you feel like, am I just like wasting their time? Or maybe there's a fear that you are wasting someone's time when you're like asking them a stupid question. Which I always tell people, there's no such thing as stupid questions, but at the same time, like, there are stupid questions, and yeah, I think there's definitely a difference between thoughtful questions and stupid questions.
I do agree with that. I mean, obviously, like, there are some... another example, I hate fucking giving over and over again examples from my life, but it's the best way I understand the world. There was a guy that I worked with at my previous employer. He was a senior guy. He was like an older guy. He was taking on the role of the site superintendent. And super nice guy. And I love this guy to death. He was a great guy. I feel terrible about how things ended up, but anyway, moral of the story here is that he started with the company, and, you know, he came in 65-ish years old. You know, I figured this guy with his age probably has the experience.
Yeah,
he probably knows.
What he's doing, yeah.
You know, and like, when you're a young male in the construction industry, or even female for that matter, it doesn't really matter. When you look at site guys that are experienced, they're actually quite intimidating, because they have a lot of years under their belt, and they generally know their skill well. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a carpenter and you see a carpenter who's 55, 60 years old, who's been doing this for their whole life, there's a very high probability that if they're still doing it at that age, that they've mastered that craft. And, you know, being a person who works in an office, I mean, I have some skills with my hands and tools, but I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a professional. So when you're talking to someone like that, and you're talking to them about their craft, you almost feel immediately intimidated. Like, you're 30 years old, or 35, or 25 in some cases, or even younger, and you're talking to these guys who've been doing it their whole life, and you have to sit there and, like, pretend like you're on their level. I mean, the reality is, how can you be? How could you possibly understand their craft that well? You can't. You can learn it over time and whatever. And anyway, this guy came in, and this was the mindset. My mindset was, this guy's a senior site superintendent, has been around the block. He obviously is aged, you know. I didn't know anything about him except for the fact that he was older, and that he was going to be working on a serious project with me. But within a couple of hours of talking to the guy, I quickly started to realize that, like, you know what, this guy doesn't seem to really know what he's doing. And, you know, I went to my boss and I was like, I'm not so sure this guy's the perfect fit for this job. And it turned out that by the end of the project, we ended up having to get rid of the guy, and I felt terrible having to do that. But, you know, the truth is that, like, he just wasn't up to the task. He didn't have the skills that he required to perform his duties. And, like, you know, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, because I had just started with the company too, thinking, like, I'm only 30 at the time. I think I started there. I was 32, 33, whatever. I was like, I can't tell this guy that he doesn't know what he's doing. I had that same mindset. And it circled back to me feeling, because I had just started there, feeling uncomfortable and, like, didn't really know if I was, like, cut for the task and whether I deserved to be in that position. So how could I be telling this guy who's 65 years old, that's been, you know, supposedly doing this his whole life, that he doesn't know what he's talking about? Right? And the reality was, it turned out that I knew a lot more than he did, and it just took time to realize that, and it took, working with the guy to start hearing little things here and there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess the bottom line is when you're going into a new role, like there's questions that can be asked, and the reason I brought all that up is because he did ask me a really stupid question. Like, and I'm sorry to use that language, but that's the truth. It was a question that, like, how do you not, if you have been building buildings on the field or in the field for 40 years, there's no way you did not come across this situation.
Yeah.
And, like, you should know the answer to this.
Yeah.
Like, so to go back to the idea of stupid questions and how this is an example that actually should, I mean, not to put fear into you, but this is an example where a question made me think he doesn't belong here.
Yeah.
Right? So it can happen,
Yeah.
but I mean, you're not a dumb guy. Like, you're an intelligent person, and like, there's no way that if somebody asks you a question in your field that you're going to be like, I don't know. Like, completely I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's just, I don't believe that. Like, you have a strong mental capacity, so there's no way.
I mean, I think I go do a little bit more digging. I think it's just like I won't ask the first stupid question. I'll like, okay, this might be a stupid question. What's like one level or 3 levels deeper into that question that I can ask that at least show like I did some research or did some investigation.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to like maybe also talk about the guy that I guess your company had to let go, because I think something I struggle with is this idea of the people talk about millennials, like they want to work at one place for like 1 year and they just want to jump around. And I kind of did the opposite. I stayed at this one place for like 8 years, and I think at some point like I started to stagnate. But I mean the raises kept coming, right, and the titles started like piling up, right? But I think young people should value skills and like skill acquisition over
title improvements.
Yeah, I think so. And especially like staying at a place for like 8 years, like, and especially when it's a position where you don't have a strong mentor, and you're just kind of like, and that's kind of like my jab maybe at like startup culture and like smaller companies where it's like you do a little bit of everything. And especially for companies that are, I guess, where they're, the business people there are a little bit more shrewd and they don't want to spend the resources to, try new technologies or take risks on, learning new things or things like that. I think it is good to kind of jump around and get more experience and see how, other people do it. And you'll be able to kind of gauge. I think that's like a key thing. Like, how do you gauge your skills? And for me, working at 8 years at one company, the only way I was able to gauge myself is in comparison, like, to pretty much like everybody that's been hired. It's like, am I like, how, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, how smart am I? Like, am I able to solve the problems?
So this is very interesting because, like, I had a very similar experience, although very different. You worked for a company that was a startup, so relatively new company. I worked for a company that's been around for 60 years when I first started in this industry. And the culture was still exactly the same. It was the same experience that you had there that I had here. These guys, they're super wealthy individuals. So the success of the business can almost be attributed strictly to the fact that they have lots of money, because they can always pump more money in to fix their problems.
Right.
And I had a great mentor. That was another big difference between the situations. I had a very good mentor who really taught me the fundamentals of construction. He was not good with paperwork. He did not understand a contract if his life depended on it, like in the level of detail that, like, legally, but he knew the business. You know what I mean? He came from the field. He came from being a laborer. He worked his way up to being a site superintendent, to being a project manager, to eventually being the construction manager or director, or whatever title you want to give him, of this company. There was nobody above him in the construction sector. And I reported directly to this guy, and he was an animal. I've told you about him before. So he was really good at learning the field game, but terrible at the office game. And, I spent 7 or 8-ish years, similar to you, at this company. And I had quite an opposite effect. I thought I was a master of the industry because this guy just bred you that way. He made you feel confident. You felt untouchable, right? And I was like telling people, oh, that's not how it works. And like, meanwhile, like a few years later, I'm thinking back to those conversations I had with those people. Man, did I ever look fucking stupid, because through the process of jumping around, I learned to calibrate that, like, what was right and what was wrong about the process that I was following.
Mm-hmm.
And now where I am, it's like these guys are super legal. They're super vigilant on paperwork. And it's just like, I used to be afraid of this. Now I love it. I would love to go to another company that puts me to the test for paperwork, because it was the jumping around that gave me the experience, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also it does not look good on your resume, though, if you're doing a year here, a year there, a year there, a year there, because there are companies that are looking for loyalty, and they're looking for people to stick around and grow with the company. So, although your advice is not that different from my advice, is to get the experience by going around, you also have to be cognizant of how it's going to look on your resume when you don't have commitment to a particular employment.
Yeah. I guess I've had some decent success on just like my resume alone, and maybe it is the loyalty part. I think I stayed like 3 years at one place and almost 8 years at the other, and that's like a decade of your life. I gave these people the best years of my life.
Well, do you regret it?
Maybe that's like a yes and no. Like, I think that's like on some levels I regret, like because of the advice that I'm doling out. It's like I think maybe things would have been better if I jumped around, but at the same time, like, it was a great experience because I was really, I was a small equity holder, so just it was that dream of like, okay, working for a startup and then having it get acquired by a larger corporation, and that was, I mean, that's a once in a lifetime thing that, so not to knock anyone else that like wants to try it, but just make sure that you're doing your certificates, like building on new skills. So I think this is actually a great piece of advice that I think I have for people out there is, while you're working, even if you're not thinking about leaving the job or whatever, but just look at what jobs are actually out there. And it doesn't hurt to like apply them just to see, like, because you look at the job postings and you'll see like, this is what they want.
Right.
Like, these are the skills. And because the field that I'm in, like digital marketing, like, things are changing so fast. So there's always new technology coming out. There's like new requirements as well. So, I mean, I think that's kind of my experience. Like, now that I'm left my old job, I took a break, and then I started looking at resumes, or sorry, looking at job postings. It was like, man, I think I'm getting left behind a little bit. Like, I don't know this skill, I don't know that skill. And it's like, and then another good one now with like LinkedIn is look at other people who have that job title and look at what their LinkedIn profile looks like. Because they've, it's like, here's all their certifications, here's their job experience, and this is how they write about, what they did. And that's kind of, and it's been kind of an experimental thing. I started looking for jobs in like mid-January, and I guess it's like 2 months later. So, yeah, now I've got an offer. Fingers crossed it goes through. But
it'll go through, man. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. I think one other piece, like for my industry, anyways, I'm sure it's the same for yours. There's always conventions. There's always like opportunities to go out there and like do your research outside of your current employment, right? Because you don't know, and like sometimes you can be blinded by that. Sometimes you can be blinded by the fact that your employers are telling you this is how the industry is and this is how you do things. And meanwhile, they're unique in that sense. And perhaps there's other ways of doing the job, and perhaps there's other ways that other companies are more used to, and other clients may look at you and not realize, or, there's just better opportunity to get exposure through different mechanisms. And I think online research is obviously a good one. Not the best, because you're not really getting a hands-on or a practical understanding. But going to conventions, talking to people, networking with people in the industry, talking to them about how their job is, doing the research on like LinkedIn, as you said. But nothing beats face-to-face contact. Like, the one thing I really respect about my industry is that, first of all, everyone loves to get fucking hammered when you go to an event. Like, these are the things that you do. You just go to a convention, everyone gets shit-faced. If you go up north for a convention, you get shit-faced. If you go to the convention center downtown, you get shit-faced. Like, that's just what you do. But in the process of doing that, you lose all your inhibitions and you start socializing with everybody. Yeah. And you really get to network well. And, like, at the early stages of the night, before you're completely out of it, you're learning some stuff. Like, you know what I mean? You're learning about how the other companies are getting business. You're learning about how they're getting things done. Yeah. You're learning about new technologies that they're introducing into their companies. These are really, really important things to be, cognizant of, and that you want to be able to bring back to your employer. And that's another thing, like, if your employer is not willing to adapt and perhaps entertain new ideas, that's for me it's a red flag that the company's not really. It probably has a lot of flaws if they're not open minded, because they're gonna operate under their own fucking set of rules and they're not gonna bend for anything or anyone.
Yeah.
And that usually ends up in becoming a dated company or whatever. So those are little things I would look for. And now that you're starting this new job, maybe keep that in mind. Like, look for the openness of the employer. Maybe take a look around and see if, like, are they innovative? Or are they looking outside of the world that they're living in for new input and that kind of stuff? Very important things. So, but anyway, that's my 2 cents on the topic. So, all right, well, I guess everybody, thank you for listening. That's another episode of Risky Thoughts. Please don't forget to check us out on Instagram at riskythoughts.to, our Twitter feed, which we never even check, to be honest, but that's Risky Thought. And obviously we have our YouTube channel, which we have yet again failed to post video content for. And I'm not even going to say that it's in the works, because I said that for the last 3 or 4 weeks in a row, and I'm just not going to let you guys down again. So we'll just leave it at that. But you can check us out on YouTube. Our episodes are aired there. And thanks a lot for listening, and have a good night.